And news has just broken that apparently the two men, Johnson and Sunak, were due to have some kind of meeting. And joining us now, I'm delighted to have Tim Shipman, who has raced into the studio. He has just filed and he's got all the inside gossip. Tim, tell us what's happening.
Well, look, it looks very interestingly like momentum is moving a bit towards Rishi Sunak. What we've revealed in our big read, which is now online, is that for the last week, intermediaries between the two men have been trying to effectively broker a kind of Granita-style deal between Johnson and Sunak. They were due to meet at 3:30 this afternoon. That didn't happen. They were then due to meet at 5:30. That didn't happen. We're still being told it might happen later this evening, but this is obviously a big moment. What Boris Johnson's hoping to do is turn up with as many supporters as he can and say, I'll give you a job. I'm going to beat you in the membership if it gets that far. You need to come and work with me. But Sunak appears to be growing in confidence that he may not need Boris Johnson on side, and that momentum is going his way. He's a decent distance ahead with the MPs already. And what we're hearing is that some people around Boris Johnson have been musing all week that really the statesmanlike thing for him to do to preserve his own reputation and to help unity in the party would be to back Sunak. And we know there are senior donors who are taking that view. And I have spoken to members of Johnson's own inner circle who were telling me as long ago as Monday, even before Liz Truss was kicked out, that that's what they would prefer him to do. It looks like Johnson is battling to get as many names as possible. His team claims he's got 100, but there's certainly other MPs who say that his people are even now phoning up people who've backed Sunak and backed Penny Mordaunt and trying to get them to change. People who've publicly declared, which suggests he's not quite got the numbers that he would like. And I think Sunak's team are growing in confidence that if he can line up key figures from the right, as he has been doing today with Kemi Badenoch, David Davis, Lord Frost, who's a big Boris Johnson guy, those people are coming out for him. And if he can show ideological sort of range, and it begins to look a bit more like a unity government, and it looks more difficult for Boris Johnson. And if Sunak turns up with half the parliamentary party, it will be difficult for the members to overturn that. And more likely, Boris Johnson is not going to want the humiliation of finishing a distant second, and it's possible that some kind of deal can be done. Now, I should say, the meeting hasn't happened. It's not a done deal. And if Rishi Sunak becomes overconfident, it's possible, that he might screw things up. But that's basically where we are. It's quite an exciting live news day on a Saturday for a change.
It certainly is. We like a lively evening burst of activity. So look, it's looking good for Rishi Sunak. Your piece is really interesting. Do read it. It's up online now. Some fascinating detail in that. Look, it looks like lots of the big guns are going to get behind Sunak. But if Boris Johnson can scrape enough to get out to the membership, he's going to win. I mean, we just had Lord Archer on, Geoffrey Archer, saying, look, he totally backs Rishi Sunak. But his worry is if Boris Johnson gets anywhere near the membership, he's won.
Well, I think that was the conventional assumption a few days ago. I'm not sure that that's what everybody thinks will happen now. Clearly, Boris Johnson would fancy his chances. But if he's a very long distance back, and, for example, if Penny Mordaunt backs Rishi Sunak as well, it will start to begin to look overwhelming and like Boris Johnson is causing a problem. Now, it's within his rights to carry on and fight. But all I can tell you is that there are people who are close to him and donors who are close to him who are telling him, you might have a second life in British politics, but this is not the moment for it. And quite a lot of them are putting pressure on him. Now, it may be that he just says, what the heck, I'm going to do it anyway. And, we have a very turbulent and difficult contest. But all I can say is that for the last week, a lot of people have been trying to prevent that. And they are still trying very hard this evening.
Fascinating stuff. Tim is going to stay with us. Let's now bring in our political panel for their reaction to this really fascinating update we've just heard from Tim Shipman. Anne McElvoy, I'll come to you first.
Well, that's, it's so interesting, isn't it? That sense that there could be this marriage, a potential marriage between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, whether it's one made in heaven, hell, or somewhere in that zone in between, just called, well, let's each take our chances. Let's look like we're open. I suspect there's a bit of that when this play goes on, probably at the National Theatre,
written by James Graham.
Or me. I mean, Hey,
Oh,
I'm open to offers. I think what's going on here is not, of course, they want to have a negotiation, but each side needs to look open to the other. It would look perhaps bad with the party for all the reasons that you've laid out very clearly, and my esteemed colleagues here on the panel have talked about. I think there's an element of that, looking as if you're open to it. Rishi Sunak, of course, desperately hoping he does not have to get into some sort of tangle with Boris Johnson, which is always tangled relationship, and they don't have a particularly strong one. But I think it is probably wise to look as if you were prepared to do one of those sort of golden duo deals. I think the chance of it working out is really small.
Steve Richards, your reaction to this very exciting sort of prospect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that Tim says the meeting has been scheduled twice and hasn't yet happened, because clearly this is a moving story. I mean, if Rishi Sunak thinks the momentum is with him, I'm not quite sure what he has to offer Boris Johnson.
Exactly.
Boris Johnson would only want to be prime minister. He's not going to take the health job, for example, or actually he's wholly unsuited for the Treasury. Now, the other way round, if it looks as if Boris Johnson was soaring towards victory, you could imagine a conversation being necessary. So I think it kind of depends on the numbers. It seems to me that the sort of declared numbers makes it look as if momentum, as we speak now, is very much with Sunak. And as long as that's the case, we've already discussed earlier, Johnson, when he sensed he wasn't going to win in 2016, pulled out very quickly after that. So obviously it's fluid. He must be working out, Johnson, how many figures he can get, and will listen also to those telling him not to do it now. But if he follows that line, I can't quite see the point of his conversation with Sunak either, because if he's not going to do it, he's not going to do it. And he'll just pull out and say we all need to coalesce around Rishi or whatever. I don't know. But he's not going to come back into the cabinet in any other shape other than prime minister. So.
And Tim, do you want to just come with that? Because that's the sort of thought I've just had. I mean, look, Big Dog is not going to want to come back and be the Minister for Local Government.
No, I don't think he would be the Minister for Local Government, but he would preserve his reputation as a statesman if he tried to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, is what some of his people are telling me. There was, I think, a suggestion earlier in the week that, everyone thinks he wants to go and make loads of money, and obviously there's an element of that, but this is a guy who likes to be in the arena. He wants to be part of the, all the excitement that's going on, but not just that. He actually likes being, in government as well. There was a suggestion he might be prepared to go back to the Foreign Office. Other people have floated ideas like, envoy to Ukraine and possible ambassadorships elsewhere. I'm not sure he could earn a great deal of money doing an ambassadorship. I think that's probably going away a bit now. And at the moment, my sense of it is that Rishi Sunak is preparing to play hardball if these talks happen, rather than bend the knee and say, I'm terribly sorry for what I did to you, Boris, and can we kindly work together. Johnson will obviously make his own power play, but, as has been said before, if he doesn't think he's going to win and if he doesn't think he's going to come out of it terribly well, it is possible he will pull stumps. And interestingly, when they told us earlier that he had 100 MPs, they said, which could mean he's on the ballot paper. And that "could" is a fascinating little word.
Could is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It's doing a lot of heavy lifting, and there's a reason for that.
Kirsty Buchanan, what do you make of all of this? Do you see any world in which a kind of sort of sweetheart deal can be done between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson?
It's a bit like a game of poker at the moment, isn't it? And I feel that perhaps Team Boris might be trying to play bluff. Look, it only works if Sunak is the Prime Minister. There's nothing in it for Sunak, I don't think, to play second fiddle to Boris Johnson, not least because their views of how to handle the economy are so radically different that it would fly apart pretty quickly. I am still struck by this word "could." My feeling is that Kemi Badenoch going to Rishi is pretty significant. So I think they are. It feels to me like they're confident that they might actually get 160, 170, in which case he can sit back and say, okay, actually, I'm in the driving seat, Boris, and, I suggest you fold in behind me. Having worked for Theresa May with Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary, though, I hope that he, can prove to be a good deal more loyal going forward than he has been in the past. Otherwise, we're just going to probably be back here all over again in pretty short order.